What's up, Gear Mortals? Trey Xavier here. On today's edition of Gear God's Quality Control, we're going to be taking a look at the Silas Fernandes signature Mud Killer pedal from Electric Eye Audio. You may not have ever heard of Silas Fernandes before, but he is a Brazilian metal guitar player. He is super sick, and he also has a YouTube channel, which we will link to in the description. The Mud Killer is, at its core, an overdrive pedal, but it's designed to deal with high gain amps and to tighten them up, boost them, and one other super cool secret feature that I'm gonna go into in a little bit. Over the last couple of years, there have been a spat of overdrive pedals that are designed to deal with modern high gain amps and the sort of problems that come with those, especially when you're playing with very low tuned guitars. The Aris Effects Savage Drive, the Horizon Devices Precision Drive, and the VFE Focus pedal are just a few of the ones that I've actually tried and used on this channel. The Mud Killer is a pedal in the vein of all those pedals that I mentioned, but it's just got a couple extra features that I'm gonna show you right now. Your everyday run-of-the-mill Tube Screamer pedal has 3 knobs on it: gain, tone, and volume. The Mud Killer has those. We've got pre-gain, that's your drive type of sound, tone, and then post-gain, that's your output volume. But the Mud Killer adds a mud control knob and 3 switches. The first switch actually turns that gain on or off, so it allows you to use it as a completely clean boost. It has a more or less switch that gives you exactly that more or less gain out of the pre-gain knob, and then a comp switch, which switches between 2 different types of clipping for the gain. The Mud Control knob is labeled 6S, 7S, and 8S at different positions on the dial, and all the way to the left it says fat, and all the way to the right it says skinny. And this is basically a high pass tight knob that the idea here is that it's 6-string, 7-string, and 8-string, depending on how low you're tuned or how tight you want it. I find that at higher tunings, if you're playing heavy music, you can get away with having a lot more low end coming off of your amp, but once you start to get below like drop C, you're gonna wanna tighten it up quite a bit, because without that, you're just gonna get a lot of that woo, woo, woo sound out of your amp when you do palm mutes and chuggy parts. And I really don't like that, it bugs me a lot. So I like a really tight low end, and the Mud Killer is able to do that in spades. But first I want to show you this super cool feature that I've never seen on an overdrive before, and that's this switch jack. So imagine you're on stage playing a show and you want to switch from your sort of crunchy, heavy rhythm tone to like a lead sound or a clean, and you've got an overdrive on in front of the amp, and you want to switch to a different channel, but you don't want to push 2 different buttons. Wouldn't it be great if you could step on one thing and it would turn off the overdrive and switch the channel on your amp? Well, believe it or not, Mr. Silas Fernandes thought of this in advance and built that into the Mud Killer. The amp that we're using today is the Orange 8030, and it's not a very metal amp. I picked it because it's not all that heavy and it needs a little help to get from where it's at to being extremely metal. And the Mud Killer is kind of the perfect pedal for that, because it's gonna do a couple of things. It's gonna tighten up the sound going in, it's gonna boost it, and you can actually add gain on board on the pedal. And then the cherry on top of all of that, of course, is built-in channel switching. So right now I'm using it in front of the amp, so going straight into the input so that it slams the preamp when I boost it. And then it's also set up to do the channel switching. And I've got the amp set up so that one channel is set to clean and the other one is set to as high gain as we can make it. And then I'm also boosting it, tightening it, and adding gain with the Mud Killer. So check this out. So here's your opening interlude, you know. People get out their lighters. And then you hit them with it like they weren't expecting it, come on. And that's with just the push of one foot switch. We've changed the channel from the clean to the high gain channel, and augmented the tone to go from basically like a classic rock crunch all the way up to this brutal high gain sound that you can use for pretty much any kind of heavy music. So if your amp just isn't really cutting it for super high gain sounds and it's got this kind of like rock distortion and you want to really crank it up, the Mud Killer might be the jam. Just for contrast, here's what the same riff sounds like without the Mud Killer, with the gain all the way up on the orange. So, not really quite as crushing as when we were using the Mud Killer to boost the front of the amp. This is a pretty great sounding amp for rock and roll, but if you want to turn it into a heavy metal machine, it's got to be boosted. Boosted. So here's the pedal going into a completely clean amp so you can hear how much gain is available just from the pedal itself. I'm also going to try it in front of the OR15 because it's a lot more high gain than the AD30. The reason I'm using orange amps is because they have a ton of low end, and the low end is where the mud happens. So we use the Mud Killer to kill the mud in the low end, bada bing, bada boom. So if you hate mud in your guitar tone as much as I do and you want to take control of the low end, you're definitely going to want to check out the Electric Eye Mud Killer. It does all this and more. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you haven't already, mash that subscribe button, smack the bell, and drop us a like for more reviews and original content. And I'll see you real soon.